A cold, damp shelter sat on the edge of town, a place where hope often faded. Among the rows of dogs, one stood apart. His coat was a mix of dark fur and scars, and his eyes, sharp, intense, seemed to pierce through the silence. This was Max, a German shepherd who'd seen things no dog should. His reputation was clear, aggressive, untrusting, and completely untamable. No one wanted him. No one, except Emily. She had never planned on adopting a dog today, let alone one like Max. But something about him, something in those eyes, told her that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't beyond saving. She didn't know it yet, but the decision she was about to make would change both their lives forever. Emily never expected to find herself in an animal shelter, let alone considering adopting a dog like Max. She had come on a whim, hoping for a pleasant afternoon, maybe petting a few puppies, but her steps slowed when she saw him. Max, the German shepherd in the corner of the room, his dark eyes watching her with a piercing intensity that made her heart race. He wasn't barking like the others. He wasn't wagging his tail in excitement. He was still, motionless, as though waiting for something. Emily stood frozen, staring into his eyes. She could sense his pain, his distrust, and something else, an undeniable urge for companionship. It was a feeling she couldn't ignore. The shelter worker noticed Emily's gaze and walked over, her face full of caution. "That's Max," she said, her voice low. "He's been here longer than any of the others. He's aggressive, untrusting. We've tried everything, but no one wants him. Not anymore." Emily didn't look away. There was something in Max's eyes that spoke to her. He wasn't just a dog who had been failed by people. He was a dog who had been misunderstood. She could see that now. A fierce determination stirred within her. "I'll take him," she said, her voice firm. The worker raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "Are you sure? He's not easy to handle. He's been through a lot. He's been abandoned before. He's been hurt. It's going to take more than just a leash to bring him back." But Emily didn't hesitate. She could feel it, something deeper than just a desire to help. Max needed her, and she needed him. The worker reluctantly handed over the paperwork. But before Emily could sign it, she added, "If you adopt him, it's not just about training. You'll have to be patient. He's been through trauma. It might never go away." "I understand," Emily said, the weight of her decision settling over her. But she wasn't afraid. She didn't know what the future would hold, but something told her this was the right choice. When the cage door opened, Max didn't move. He simply watched her, as though weighing whether he could trust her or not. Emily stepped closer, slowly, and clipped the leash onto his collar. His body stiffened, but he didn't growl or resist. There was a moment of silence between them, a brief understanding. Max was a dog who had been let down by the world. Emily was a woman who had been searching for meaning, for a connection that transcended the ordinary. Maybe this was the bond she had been waiting for. As she led him out of the shelter and into the parking lot, the weight of the leash in her hand felt heavier than she had anticipated. Max was a large, powerful dog, and she had no idea what she was getting into. But she also knew one thing: this was just the beginning of a journey neither of them could have predicted. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she drove Max home. The weight of the decision hung heavy in the air. She hadn't expected it to be this hard. The moment she had left the shelter, she had felt both the rush of adrenaline and a deep sense of responsibility. But now, as Max sat silently beside her in the car, his piercing eyes locked on her every move, she wasn't so sure. She had read books on dog training, watched countless YouTube videos, and even spoken with a few experts. But nothing had prepared her for the reality of bringing Max into her life. He wasn't just a dog with a troubled past. He was a dog who was actively rejecting any form of human connection. The soft growls that rumbled in his chest every time she tried to reach out only confirmed what the shelter worker had warned her about. Max wasn't going to make this easy. When they finally pulled into the driveway of her home, Emily took a deep breath. It was a quiet suburban neighborhood, peaceful, surrounded by trees and quiet streets. It should have been the perfect place for a dog to settle in, but Max wasn't just any dog. She opened the door, and Max stepped out without hesitation. His posture was stiff, his ears flattened, and his tail hung low. He was alert, scanning the environment like a soldier preparing for battle. Emily stood still for a moment, watching him carefully. She wasn't sure how to approach this. She had to be cautious, give him space, but also start building a connection. But what if he didn't want one? Max's eyes turned toward her, and for the first time since they had met, she saw a flicker of something new: curiosity. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Emily took a tentative step toward him, then another, her movements slow and deliberate. She didn't want to push him, but she knew that this was the moment where their journey would truly begin. When she reached out to him, Max flinched. His body went rigid, and his lips curled back, revealing a flash of sharp teeth. Emily froze, her heart pounding in her chest. He was warning her, a clear signal that she was crossing a boundary. She pulled back, giving him the space he needed. "Okay, Max," she whispered to herself. "I get it. You're not ready." But Emily didn't give up. She couldn't. She wasn't sure why, but she felt connected to him already. She understood his pain in a way that no one else could. She had been through her own struggles in life, feeling abandoned, misunderstood, and alone. Maybe that's why she couldn't just walk away. The next few days were a constant back and forth of small victories and setbacks. Emily would spend hours sitting in the living room, her eyes never leaving Max, who would pace nervously around the room. She would throw a ball, but Max would only stare at it, unmoving, unsure of what it meant. Sometimes he would bark, low, deep growls that shook the walls, but Emily never flinched. She knew that his aggression wasn't about her. It was about his fear. He didn't know how to trust, the frustration built within her. She had been patient, had followed all the rules. But nothing seemed to work. Max was stubborn, and she was no closer to breaking through his walls than when they had first met. Then, one evening, after a particularly long day of failed attempts, Max did something unexpected. As Emily sat on the couch, exhausted, he approached her slowly, cautiously. He stopped just a few feet away, his eyes studying her. But this time, there was no growl, no threat, just silence. For a moment, the two of them simply stared at each other. The space between them charged with a quiet understanding. Emily didn't move. She let him make the next move, knowing it had to come from him. Slowly, he lowered his head, not in submission, but in a gesture that told her he was willing to give her a chance. That small, unspoken moment was everything. It wasn't much, but it was progress. Emily knew then that no matter how long it took, she wasn't giving up on Max. She couldn't. The days blurred together as Emily worked tirelessly to bridge the growing gap between herself and Max. She was determined, but the road ahead was far from easy. Every step forward felt fragile, like walking on thin ice. Just when she thought she had made progress, something would trigger Max's fear or aggression, setting them both back. But Emily wasn't giving up. She couldn't. Max had started to show subtle signs of trust, small things that gave her hope. He no longer flinched when she approached him, though he still kept his distance. Sometimes, he would even lie on the floor in the same room as her, his body relaxed, but his eyes never fully left her. Emily took these moments as victories. She knew that with each passing day, they were moving closer to the connection they both needed. One rainy afternoon, Emily decided to try something different. Instead of sitting back and waiting for Max to come to her, she decided to step into his world. She had read that many dogs, especially those with traumatic pasts, needed to feel in control of their environment before they could trust their humans fully. So, she opened the back door to the small yard, watching as Max paced nervously at the threshold. That he seemed unsure, his instincts telling him to stay close, but his desire to explore keeping him in place. Emily crouched down to his level, holding out her hand, palm open. "Come on, Max," she coaxed softly, her voice gentle but firm. "Let's see what's out there." It took a few moments, but finally, Max moved forward. He stepped outside, pausing to sniff the wet grass. His body was tense but curious. Emily followed him at a safe distance, not wanting to push him but watching closely for any signs of distress. For the first time since he had arrived at her home, Max seemed at peace. He wandered the yard slowly, taking in the scents and sounds of his new environment, and Emily stood silently by the door, heart racing. She couldn't believe it. He was actually allowing himself to explore, but just as hope began to swell within her, the calm was shattered. Max suddenly froze. His ears perked up, and his entire body went rigid. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she watched him growl low in his chest. His eyes locked onto something in the distance, a shadow in the trees just beyond the fence. Before Emily could react, Max darted toward the gate with lightning speed. His body was tense, ready to attack. Emily rushed forward, but it was too late. Max's powerful form collided with the gate, barking furiously. "Max, stop!" Emily shouted, her voice cracking. She reached for him, but he wasn't listening. His aggression had taken over, and in that moment, Emily realized just how much work they still had ahead of them. With a surge of adrenaline, Emily grabbed the leash from the nearby hook and ran toward him. Max growled, but she managed to loop the leash around his collar, pulling him away from the gate. "Easy, Max, it's okay," she whispered, trying to calm him down. She kept her grip firm but gentle, guiding him back into the house. Once inside, Max immediately retreated to his corner, panting heavily. His eyes were wild with confusion and fear. Emily stood in the doorway, her heart pounding. She felt defeated. After all the progress, all the trust they had built, the setback felt like a punch to the gut, but as she watched Max still panting in the corner, something inside her shifted. She wasn't going to let this break them. It was just another test, one that she and Max would face together. And no matter how many setbacks they encountered, Emily knew that she wasn't walking away. She couldn't, they had both been through too much. The days after the incident by the gate were filled with a heavy silence. Emily's heart felt like a weight in her chest, and Max's behavior had only grown more unpredictable. He was still distant, still unpredictable, and every movement seemed to be calculated. He avoided her, keeping to the shadows of the house. His body was stiff whenever she came near. Emily knew she had to be patient. She had to rebuild the trust they had started to build, piece by piece. But it wasn't going to be easy. Max's outbursts had shaken her confidence. She had told herself that she was prepared for the challenges of adopting a dog with a troubled past, but this felt different. It wasn't just about patience anymore, it was about survival. Max's fear and aggression ran so deep, and Emily knew that she had to figure out how to reach him before things escalated further. One evening, after Max had retreated to his corner, Emily sat on the couch, her eyes never leaving him. She had learned that the more she tried to rush their bond, the more Max retreated. The problem wasn't just about earning his trust, it was about proving to him that she wouldn't abandon him, that no matter what, she would be there for him, even when he tested her. It had been a week since the incident. And Emily was beginning to wonder if she was in over her head. Max hadn't improved. He hadn't responded to any of the training methods she had researched. Every attempt felt like a failure, and every look from Max seemed to remind her of how far they still had to go. But then, one night, as she was sitting quietly in the living room, Max did something that stopped her heart. He approached her. It was a slow, hesitant movement, his body low to the ground, as though he was testing the waters. His eyes were still cautious, but they no longer held the same level of distrust. He stopped just a few feet from her, his body tense but not aggressive. Emily didn't move. She held her breath, waiting. She knew this could go either way. If she made the wrong move, he would retreat again, just like before, but this time, it was different. This time, Max didn't back away. Slowly, he lowered his head, eyes never leaving hers. He wasn't growling, but he wasn't wagging his tail either. He was still guarded, but for the first time, there was a glimmer of something, hope. Emily reached out slowly, her hand hovering just above his head. Max didn't flinch. He didn't growl. He stayed still, allowing her hand to come closer. When her fingers brushed the top of his head, Max's body tensed, but he didn't pull away. Emily's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't much, but it was everything. For the first time, Max was letting her in. She let her hand rest gently on his head, her touch light but firm. "It's okay, Max," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." For a long moment, neither of them moved. It felt like time had stopped. Emily could feel the heat of Max's fur beneath her fingers, the tension in his body slowly melting away. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The moment she realized they weren't just two strangers thrown together by circumstance, they were beginning to understand each other. Max's eyes softened, and for the first time, Emily saw a flicker of the dog she had always hoped he could be. The strong, fierce dog with a heart that had been buried beneath layers of fear and pain. It was there, finally beginning to emerge. Max leaned into her touch just slightly, but enough for her to feel the weight of his trust. Emily smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. She knew this was only the beginning, but it was the beginning of something real. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure: she and Max were in this together, no matter how hard it got. The breakthrough with Max hadn't come without its own set of complications. Emily's optimism, though renewed, was fragile. She knew they weren't out of the woods yet. For every small step forward, there was another challenge waiting just around the corner. Max was still unpredictable, still haunted by the shadows of his past, and Emily could feel the weight of their struggle pressing down on her every day. Over the following weeks, things seemed to improve at times. Max became more comfortable with her presence. He allowed her to pet him more frequently, and there were moments when he even looked at her with something resembling affection. Small moments of connection that made the struggles feel worthwhile. But just as quickly, the progress would be undone. Emily had learned to expect the unexpected. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Max suddenly bolted upright, his body stiff and rigid, his eyes wide with fear. He looked toward the window, then back at her, growling low in his throat. Emily's stomach churned as she followed his gaze, but there was nothing outside, no movement, no sounds. "Max," she whispered, trying to calm him, but he was already in motion. He rushed to the door, his paws scraping against the floor, his growls rising in volume. It was as though he was seeing something terrifying, that she couldn't understand. Hey, it's okay, Emily said, reaching for him. But Max wasn't listening. His whole body was vibrating with tension as he barked at the door. She backed away, unsure of how to approach him without setting him off even more. She could feel the panic rising within her, but she couldn't let Max see it. She had to stay calm for him. He was still fighting invisible demons, his mind racing, and there was nothing she could do but wait for him to calm down. Max barked louder still, as if trying to warn her, trying to warn them both. Emily's mind raced, her heart hammering in her chest. She had seen his aggression before, but this was different. It wasn't just the usual fear-driven reaction. It was something more intense. She took a deep breath and reached for the leash. Hanging by the door, pulling it out carefully. Max, she said again, her voice shaking slightly. Come on, let's go outside. We'll get some fresh air. Okay? It took a few moments, but eventually, Max seemed to calm down. His barks turned into low whines as he backed away from the door. Emily grabbed the leash, clipped it onto his collar, and slowly opened the door. He hesitated, but after a beat, he stepped outside, his body still on high alert. The moment they stepped into the yard, Max froze once again. His eyes scanned the trees, the fence, every corner. Emily stood still behind him, watching as his ears flicked in every direction, his muscles tense, ready to spring into action at the slightest sound. For a long moment, they just stood there, Emily waiting and Max searching for something that was still invisible to her. It was as if the world had shifted beneath them, and nothing felt safe anymore. This was a side of Max she hadn't seen before, a raw, untamed part of him that was still trying to protect himself from some unseen threat. Emily's heart ached as she watched him. She didn't know what had triggered this outburst. It could have been a sound, a shadow, or something else entirely. But it didn't matter. The moment was proof of how fragile their bond still was. And yet, even as she stood there, feeling her own fear rise, Emily knew something important. This wasn't the end of their journey. It couldn't be. She wasn't going to let it be. Max was still healing, still fighting his past, and so was she. They were both in this together. They would find a way through the darkness, no matter how many times they stumbled or fell. Emily took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long while, felt a surge of determination. This was a test, and she was ready to face it. The days that followed the unsettling night outside were filled with a quiet tension. Max was different now. He had become more withdrawn, more cautious, as if his world had grown even smaller. Emily had tried everything, calm voices, soothing words, and patience, but nothing seemed to reach him. In those moments, he had retreated back into himself. His eyes were often distant and filled with a sorrow that Emily couldn't quite understand, but she refused to back down. She refused to let this be the end of their journey together. She had come so far with him, and despite the setbacks, despite the doubts, she knew that Max was worth the fight. She could see the flickers of the dog he could be beneath the layers of fear and mistrust. The dog who wanted to love, to trust. He just didn't know how. Then, one afternoon, everything changed. Emily had been sitting in the backyard, reading a book, when she heard a faint sound, a rustling, followed by the low growl of Max. She looked up, startled to see him standing at the edge of the yard, staring at something in the distance. His posture was rigid, but there was something different this time. Instead of the frantic energy she had come to expect, there was a calmness in his stance, as if he had made a choice. Max's eyes flicked back to her, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't turn away. He didn't retreat. He looked at her as if waiting for something. Emily's heart skipped a beat. This was the moment she had been waiting for. Max, she whispered, her voice soft but steady. Max took a single step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. Emily stood up slowly, her breath catching in her throat. Could this really be happening? Could he finally be ready to trust her fully? Another step, and then another. Slowly, cautiously, Max walked toward her. His eyes were filled with uncertainty. But there was a sense of resolve in his movements. He wasn't sure what was happening, but he was willing to take the chance. He had chosen her. Good boy, Max, Emily said, her voice breaking slightly with emotion. She took a step forward, then knelt down, holding out her hand, palm open. Max stopped just a few feet away from her, his eyes searching hers, unsure but hopeful. For a moment, everything stood still. The world around them seemed to fade away. Emily could feel her heartbeat in her chest, her hands shaking slightly as she reached out toward him, and then, to her amazement, Max took one final step forward. He lowered his head, nuzzling her hand with his nose, the softest of gestures, but one that spoke volumes. Max had made his choice. He had decided to trust her. Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she stroked his fur gently. I knew you could do it, Max, she whispered, the words barely audible through the lump in her throat. "You're not alone anymore." For the first time, Max leaned into her touch fully. His body relaxed, his tail giving a cautious wag. The tension that had defined their relationship for so long seemed to melt away in that moment. It wasn't just a small victory, it was a transformation. It was the culmination of all the hard work, all the patience, all the moments of doubt and frustration that had led them to this place. And in that moment, Emily knew that no matter what came next, they had made it through the worst of it. Max had found his way back from the edge, and Emily had found a piece of her heart she didn't even know was missing. Max wasn't just her rescue dog anymore. He was her family. And this was just the beginning of their new life together. Max's journey, just like Emily's, was one of growth, healing, and trust. It wasn't an easy path. There were many moments when giving up seemed like the only option. But through resilience, patience, and unconditional love, they both overcame the darkness of their pasts and found a new beginning together. Max wasn't just a dog anymore. He had become a symbol of hope, proof that even the most broken hearts can be healed and that the bond between a dog and their human is one that knows no limits. If this story touched your heart, remember this: no matter how difficult things may seem, love and patience can make all the difference. If Max can find his way, so can you. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share this video with someone who needs a little inspiration today. Together, we can spread more stories of courage, hope, and the incredible bond we share with our furry companions.